guys, it's Titan here, and welcome to Codex Review. Today we're going to be starting by reviewing Star Wars Empire at War. Some of you may recognize it, others may not have ever heard of this game before. For myself, Empire at War brings back feelings of nostalgia, and a time when Star Wars games really pushed boundaries and created meaningful and worthwhile experiences. Empire at War is a strategy title released back in 2006, a time that some may, with good reason, call the golden age of gaming. It was a more simple time, when games were designed and developed to be stunning at launch and deliver full experiences before companies like EA began to cut out major content, not for the good of the game or the player experience, but rather to repackage and sell it back to you at a cut above the box price of a major title. When single-player content was as important as multiplayer, when replayability and quality were at the forefront of gaming, even in the AAA world. With that passion for the product and a consumer-centric approach, we got some amazing Star Wars titles that really pushed the boundaries, and even today stand taller and stronger than nearly any modern title set in the same universe. Much as the Titans of Greek mythology were the forerunners, they were greater still than even the gods. In this era, we saw some amazing games like Star Wars Galaxies, where instead of playing as the hero of the story, you inhabited the life of a character somewhere in the Star Wars universe, and even the mere sight of the iconic Jedi or Sith was enough to create memorable, player-driven stories that stood the test of ages. Games like Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2, which both delivered a groundbreaking narrative experience that gave you the freedom to play the game in any way you saw fit and exert real influence on the narrative. But before we go too far off topic, let's hop into Empire at War. Empire at War received a single expansion called Forces of Corruption, which added a staggeringly large amount of content and is truly an expansion worthy of the name. Because Empire at War was released more than 10 years ago, instead of selling the expansions separately, both Empire at War and Forces of Corruption are packaged together as the Gold Pack, both on Steam and on GOG. So I'll be talking about Empire at War as if it also includes all of the expansion content. There are some minor differences between the base game and Forces of Corruption, such as the scout position for fleets, which allows you to bring a single ship as a scout into combat first, and then bring reinforcements into the battle later. But most features are more or less identical to the base game. The majority of the content added with Forces of Corruption consists of the new campaign, the new faction, and all of the ships and ground units that come with the Zon Consortium. There are some minor differences between the Steam and GOG releases, but I'll go over those at the end of the review when I make a recommendation on which of the two you should purchase, if you don't already own Empire at War. I imagine that right around now, you're all just as eager to discuss the nuts and bolts of Empire at War as I am. But we just have to talk about some of the technical limitations of playing a title from 2006 on modern hardware, because if your trip down memory lane is anything like mine was, strap in and get ready to hit a lot of bumps before you can actually get to any of the good stuff. Empire at War was designed to run on a 32-bit OS, with a single or a dual-core CPU. Your first instinct when hearing this might be something like, wow, my machine isn't even going to break a sweat, the performance is going to be silky smooth. Well, I hate to break it to you, but it's not going to be that easy. If you try to run Empire at War out of the box, both the Steam and the GOG releases, you're going to run into a considerable amount of stuttering, lag, and terrible frame rates. The good news is that there are a number of fairly easy steps you can take to ensure that your game runs amazingly on your modern machine. First, you must run the executable in compatibility mode. The ideal would be to target Windows XP Service Pack 3. But I actually ran into problems here. Whenever I started the game in compatibility targeting any XP service pack, Empire at War would minimize the second I clicked anywhere on the screen. I eventually fixed this problem by targeting the next oldest OS before XP, which was Windows 98. Secondly, given the design limitations of 32-bit operating systems, Empire at War runs into issues with 64-bit operating systems and large amounts of RAM that 32-bit OSs couldn't recognize. The good news here is that there is a RAM fix that's available for free download all over the internet. I'll include a link in the description down below. Lastly, While I personally didn't experience any poor performance after applying the 2 previous fixes, during my research I found a lot of people claiming that they were running into more performance issues and that setting the affinity of the process for Empire at War to run on a single or a dual core cleared that problem up for them. I think there may be some validity to this, as my Intel i7 is a 6-core 12-thread CPU, and I could see that a game designed in an era of dual cores may run into some issues with a CPU like that, but I can't personally recommend trying this unless everything else has failed. So with that out of the way, let's get into the game. Star Wars Empire at War is an amazing strategy game that really goes the distance when it comes to making the Star Wars universe feel alive, and has some features like the multi-element gameplay that stand out for a game from 2006. In truth, Empire at War is a lot more like 3 games rolled into one: the galaxy map, space combat, and ground combat. Like any game, it's not without its flaws, but the really good outshines the bad here. You take the role of the commander of your chosen faction, either the Empire, the Rebellion, or the Zon Consortium, and command your forces across the galaxy as you engage in combat in space as well as on the ground. This multi-element gameplay is fairly outstanding. It's hard to put into words, but there's something truly amazing about moving forces from across the galaxy to a planet you want to conquer, then fighting an epic space battle with Imperial Star Destroyers and Mon Calamari cruisers in orbit over a planet, and finally landing ground forces and seeing iconic units like the AT-ATs, Stormtroopers, Rebellion troops, and even heroes from the films like Han Solo and Darth Vader. The first layer here is the galaxy map. Here you will be ordering the construction of space stations, defensive structures, ships, buildings on your planets, and even ground units. With an overview of the entire galaxy, you can plan where you want to station fleets and how you want them structured, and most importantly, you can build invading forces and plan attacks. Each planet in the galaxy is unique and can provide different rewards for controlling it. Kessel, for example, is the infamous home of the spice mines, and thus provides a much larger credit income than the average world. And because it is an asteroid, its building space is quite limited, which makes sense for the lore. Kuat, alternatively, home of the Kuat Drive Yards, or KDY as you might have heard it in the past, is one of the greatest manufacturers of capital ships in the Star Wars universe. With access to massive capital construction yards in orbit and the experience of KDY, if you control Kuat, not only can you build capital ships there, but you get a discount on the construction cost of some ships, such as the Imperial Star Destroyers. Differences such as these are nearly always true to the lore of Star Wars, and really make each planet feel individual and unique, and it can also make battles and territory feel memorable in a unique way. In comparison with an amazing modern strategy title like Stellaris, I often find that battles just happen places that have no real importance or significance to me. I forget which systems they happen in, and unless it's my capital that is being attacked, I honestly really don't care most of the time. Empire at War fixes this flaw. Each system is likely a world you know the name of and have some knowledge of, from Coruscant to Tatooine. The galaxy map is filled with memories and details that would make even the most hardcore Star Wars fans drool. That's not to say it's without its flaws, but you really have to give credit to the attention to detail here. The second layer is space combat, and it is the standout feature by an immeasurable amount. In space, you get to see all of your Star Wars favorites, from the massive Imperial Star Destroyers to the tiny yet iconic X-Wings, and every single Star Wars ship in between. Ships, much like ground units, also have special abilities that can be activated, like the tractor beams aboard Imperial Star Destroyers, or changing the position of the S-foils on X-Wings. You can even use Imperial super weapons, like the Executor Super Star Destroyer, or even the Death Star. And before you ask, yes, absolutely, you can use it to destroy everything from planets to enemy ships. Bottom line, if you can remember the name of a ship design from the Star Wars universe, chances are you will find it in Empire at War. It even includes a few new amazing ship designs you have likely never seen before, specifically the capitals and support ships for the Zon Consortium included in the Forces of Corruption expansion. The Zon Consortium ships really are amazing. So much so that despite my love for Imperial ship designs, I'm often finding myself starting new galactic conquests as the Zon Consortium just because it gives me a chance to play with the Vengeance class frigate or the Aggressor class Star Destroyer. Strategy really shines in space combat. Here, fleet composition is king. It's so important that at times you may be able to tell if you're walking into a losing fight as soon as you see the enemy's fleet composition and compare it to your own. Overwhelming numbers do not always mean victory. This may sound a bit shallow on the surface, but it's actually got a surprising amount of depth. First off, providing that there are no interdictors with their gravity well generators online, you can always order your forces to retreat. This gives you a small countdown, after which any ships that are not heavily damaged will jump into hyperspace, escaping to fight another day. At times, the tactically correct decision may be to retreat with your surviving forces to battle another day. Tiny inclusions, such as the interdictor cruisers, create another great level of strategy. There is no rebellion equivalent of the interdictor, which is just one tiny detail that helps separate the two opposing factions and makes them feel different in a unique way. This, coupled with other nice touches like the rebellion starting with and maintaining a much heavier emphasis on fighters over the Imperial's larger and more common capital ships, makes you feel like you're playing the under-equipped rebellion against the massive empire and all its resources. There's one last major feature here, which is by far the best part of space combat: ship subsystems. If you've been watching this video instead of running it in the background, you may have noticed the odd blob of green UI images that pops up every time you mouse over a ship. It may seem unusual on the surface, but trust me, it's actually amazing. Every ship of the frigate class or larger has many different components or subsystems that represent ship systems or equipment that each have their own individual health and can be damaged or destroyed. For example, on the Imperial Star Destroyer, you could target each individual turbo laser or ion cannon to destroy them, or maybe you want to destroy the hangar bay to prevent it from launching fighters to replenish losses, or even the engines to prevent a getaway, or even the tractor beam as it locks down one of your ships. There are tons of options here, and it makes each individual fight feel unique and different in many ways. All of these features come together in an amazing way and really complement one another. Having small ships like corvettes or fighters is super important if you want to maintain fighter supremacy. If you don't, you will be punished for it. You may find that your fleet of only capital ships is lacking in any significant anti-fighter capabilities, which could leave your fleet open to consistent bombing runs from the enemy. Since bombers can penetrate shields, you may find yourself losing some capitals or some frigates to even a small amount of bomber squadrons before your ships have even been able to reach the enemy station or fleet. Alternatively, having larger capital ships is also important if you expect to be smashing high-level enemy space stations or enemy capital ships. As with everything in life, balance is key here. I really can't tell you enough about how much space combat can create memorable battles even after you've played tons of them. I remember this one time an Imperial fleet attacked one of my planets that had a small space station and a small fleet of support ships that I was building. I was outnumbered and outclassed with little chance of any victory, but I didn't want to lose all of the corvettes and fighters I had been building up during my rebellion campaign. Naturally, I wanted to retreat to minimize losses, but much to my dismay, I discovered that the Imperial fleet included an interdictor, which had now activated its gravity well, preventing me from jumping my forces to safety. In doing so, it became separated from the larger and slower-moving Imperial fleet. So I moved my considerably more agile fleet of corvettes and Y-wings around the Imperial fleet, using the corvettes for fighter interception to protect my Y-wings, and when I was in range, my Y-wings were able to target and destroy the gravity well generator aboard the interdictor by ignoring its shields. With the gravity well destroyed, I was able to jump my fleet to safety while incurring minimal losses. Not every battle will give you the chance to do something as unique as that, but there really are a lot of different options for strategies here, and you may be able to create some amazing stories that you'll definitely want to tell your friends about. At times, things will begin to feel repetitive or even annoying as you engage in battle after battle or just wait for units to move across the map. Luckily, there are some great quality of life features here to prevent you from ever feeling like you're being forced to engage in an element of gameplay that you don't want to. As any real-time strategy title should, Empire at War includes both a pause and a speed up feature, allowing you to carefully consider your actions while paused or even walk away. Alternatively, if you find something is taking longer than it should, or you just want the time to pass faster, you can always speed the game up. These may sound like minor quality of life features, but if you just count the amount of times you'll be clicking the speed up button, you'll understand how major this really is. There's also a feature called auto resolve. This allows you to choose if you want to play the tactical combat yourself or allow the game to calculate the likely outcome of the battle, and this works on both the ground and in space, so that you don't actually have to fight it if you don't want to. This is a huge feature, and it's not without its problems. There are times when the outcomes just seem screwy. I can think of many times I've sent a balanced fleet that outnumbered enemy forces, and like more than half of it was lost using auto-resolve. Things are even worse with the auto-resolve for ground combat. At times, I would lose 40 to 60 ground units in auto-resolve when attacking a world that had nearly no ground-based structures and only a handful of defending troops. This may give you the impression that you may never want to use auto-resolve, but we're almost at the ground combat section of this review, and there are quite a lot of other things to take into account here. Without auto-resolve, Empire at War simply wouldn't be the great game that it is today, but we'll get into that soon. Unfortunately, I can't put it off anymore. I would love to tell you about the campaigns, or the skirmish mode, or the amazing standout here that is Galactic Conflict. But we're gonna have to cover that later on, because we just can't get into the rest without talking about the very real problems of ground combat. I've always believed in a compliment sandwich when delivering harshly negative feedback, so I'm gonna start with the only big positive I can think of. Ground combat environments are fairly varied and include weather effects which can change the stats of certain ground forces, making them less effective. They also do include all of the iconic ground units, and there are a few tiny attentions to detail here that are really nice, like the Rebel speeders being able to topple AT-ATs using the cables, just like in Empire Strikes Back, which is really cool. Sadly, that's where the upsides end. First off, I have to mention that the ground combat looks terrible. The graphics here are beyond awful, even from a 2006 title. They're terrible to begin with, but space combat can at times be very pleasing, so the contrast between the graphics in space and on the ground really just highlights the terrible looking units, animations, terrain, and the maps of ground combat. I also experienced the highest number and frequency of bugs here, such as units clipping into areas they shouldn't be able to go to, essentially trapping them. On some occasions in the campaign, this occurred with hero units that were required for the rest of the mission, forcing a restart. On other occasions, it may be less game-breaking, but even with standard units, it's a major inconvenience, and the difficulty from any game should always come from the design of the levels and not from the player wrestling with bugs. Things may already sound harsh, but there is still a lot more to talk about. Ground combat completely removes nearly any strategy element that shines in space. There are still unit strengths and weaknesses, but they're pointless, much like the weather effects, because no matter your difficulty, the best strategy you can employ is to just deploy a force of balanced composition and put them into a single giant mega death ball and then roll it around the map. There was an attempt here to create strategic gameplay with control points that add unit capacity, allowing you to land more forces from space. But there really is no incentive to hold these points once you've already captured them and landed more troops, because there's no downside to losing them. You might as well just roll your troops through to land more forces and then head to the enemy structures. No matter how hard I tried, despite the best efforts of the developers, ground combat just feels shallow, with no real strategic elements. Thankfully, the auto-resolve feature allows you to just mass forces on the galactic map and skip ground combat altogether. Without it, I'm not sure I could stomach Empire at War. This naturally leads into another big problem with Empire at War ground combat. If you're playing Galactic Conquest, a mode which gives you free reign of the galaxy, and it's up to you to conquer it all, there is a single, decidedly correct choice when it comes to ground-based structures. For every planet you capture, simply build the production facilities you need to mass-produce units, and then spam credit-generating structures in all the other slots. Seriously, that's it. You can build some tactically useful structures, most important of these being the ground-based space weapons, which help significantly in the defense of important worlds. But aside from that, there really is no reason to ever build the rest, because ground combat is dull. You will find yourself auto-resolving it almost always, which means troop consumption will be higher than average, which then means you will need much more credits to just spam troops. Seriously, even on the hardest difficulty, I would eventually find myself just mass producing a cheap infantry unit like the stormtroopers until I had hundreds, and then just auto-resolving ground combat after ground combat to conquer the entire galaxy. I've played entire campaigns without ever starting a single ground combat. It's really that bad. I suppose if we're aiming for a real compliment sandwich here, then I've got to close on the benefits of the auto-resolve for ground combat. It's just amazing to have the option to be able to skip areas of the game that you find miserable or bog you down. Not many games do this. In fact, most lean into their terrible sections, forcing you to play through them to pad playtime. Those games, however, are not Empire at War. Sound is often a make or break it part of any game, and in this case, it really makes the game. A couple of times now I've talked about immersion, or buying into the universe as I've put it, and sound effects and music are key. From the voice acting to the sound effects to the music, Empire at War shines. Everything feels like it's where it's supposed to be and sounds great. I can't think of a single sound that is out of place over the course of the entire game. Everything is true to its origin. Even the Death Star firing sequence, with its amazingly unique sounds, are exactly those from the movie, maybe with some minor enhancements. Just take a moment to really listen to some of this stuff. I do have to hand it to everyone who worked on the sound for this game. Even when it comes to some of the ship models, which are terrible, some of the Corvettes come to mind when standing in contrast beside the Star Destroyer, their sound still elevates them and makes them feel like they had a place on the battlefield. Most of the time, I'm not the kind of person who buys the original soundtrack for games, but there are a few notable exceptions, Hacknet being one of them. I really wish Empire at War had this soundtrack available for purchase, but that really wasn't a common thing for most older titles, and seems to be more of a modern addition. On the bright side, you can find the entire soundtrack for both Empire at War and Forces of Corruption on YouTube if you ever feel like listening to it again. It's not the best Star Wars music I've heard in a game. I think that title is currently held by the Star Wars Galaxies soundtrack, but it's definitely one of the best out there. Alright, let's talk about the game modes. There are tons of things to do and a ton of replayability for this title. The flagship mode of Empire at War is without question the Galactic Conflict. In Galactic Conflict, you choose a faction and start off with a handful of planets, and you're free to build, upgrade, and conquer however you see fit from that point on. I've sunk in hundreds, if not thousands of hours into this game mode, and I don't regret a second of it. There are also skirmishes, which take place on a single map, in space, or on the ground, and are all about capturing strategic nodes to secure income to build more units and upgrade them. Eventually, one side will overpower the other, destroying their base and securing victory. Skirmishes can be fun, short bouts of combat, but do feel fulfilling in their own way, especially since they are the only game mode in which you can build and use units in the tactical map, instead of building in the galaxy map and then initiating tactical combat. This does detract slightly from the strategy element that comes with planning ahead of time, but it does bring the action gameplay to the forefront, and is a standout mode if you only have a bit of time to play, but want something fulfilling in its own right. Empire at War also includes 3 playable campaigns, each with its own unique feel. These are a lot more linear, but include some very nice story elements, and the voice acting really makes them stand out, especially for the Zon Consortium. They can be a bit short. For an experienced player, they will take between 3 and 4 hours of gameplay, even on the hardest difficulty, but across the 3 campaigns, that does give you a total of roughly 12 hours of story content, though you will be doing a lot of tactical combat that is not related to the story. These campaigns are fairly good, even for the day and age, and even include some nice tidbits for the fanbase. The Imperial campaign has you attempting to crush the Rebellion, and you can expect appearances from characters like Vader, Palpatine, and Tarkin, and many others. Each character in the story provides standout voice acting, which goes a long way to making you buy into the story. I mean, this voice acting really is awesome. Just listen to this stuff.
My lord, we've located a small rebel outpost using the nearby abandoned communications tower to receive Imperial transmissions.
Have the rebels detected our presence?
No, my lord. We jammed their sensors and communications before we landed.
I hope that you are not mistaken, Commander. We will eliminate the rebel forces here and discover the identity of the traitor with one swift strike.
Yes, sir.
I've chosen a side in this conflict.
What would you have me do, Your Majesty?
Nothing. Continue with the Death Star. I will take care of this person.
You can actually also get non-canonical endings in the Imperial campaign, such as the Death Star destroying the final rebel base, crushing them out of existence once and for all, or Vader personally leading a strike force to destroy the final rebel hideout. The Rebel campaign does have its own unique feel to it, however you receive the same canonical ending from the movies, in this case ending with the Rebel Awards ceremony. The Zon Consortium campaign is by far the standout of the bunch, as it includes a wealth of new features, units, and ships. As an underworld faction, you can corrupt worlds you don't actually have control over to gain benefits, such as access to the black markets and technology or credits accrued via a toll on passing ships. You also get to use some of the most unique ships I've ever seen in the Star Wars universe, especially when it comes to their special weapons. The Aggressor class, as an example, has a dual special weapon that fires a massive ion burst that heavily damages shields, followed by an energy blast that destroys hull. Not only do these look amazing, but they really make these ships stand out. The Vengeance class is also a great example. It has no shields, but instead gets a much thicker armor and is equipped with mass drivers that ignore enemy shields. This allows you to punch directly into the critical systems of enemy ships. These new ships, and even more, from the fighters to the capitals, all look and feel so powerful that it's always a joy to be playing them. Not to mention the new strategies they open the door to. The voice acting for the Zon Consortium is also arguably the best in the game. I would tell you a bit more about the story of the Zon Consortium, but honestly, it's such a standout for storytelling that I don't want to ruin any of it for you. Besides, if you've not played Empire at War, then it's definitely worth buying the gold pack to try it out. It's also the only campaign story that you haven't already seen in a movie or in a book, so it's definitely worth discovering yourself. While it's not exactly a game mode, the battle cam is also a great inclusion that deserves to be talked about, though it's not without its flaws. If you've been wondering how I've been capturing a lot of the cinematic style footage that you've been seeing in this video, well, all of that is thanks to the battle cam. It's a feature that can be enabled with a single button or just by hitting the spacebar during any tactical combat. It hides the UI and turns the overhead camera into a dynamic one that follows fighters, focuses on ships as they exchange fire, and even zooms out to give you a good view of many ships or even an entire fleet. At times, it has a weird mind of its own and can end up focusing on a single fighter off on the other end of the map while a massive battle is raging and ships are exploding. But you can always just tap the spacebar to swap to a different vantage point. It's not perfect, but out of all of the features in Empire at War, it's one I never ever forgot about. With what was undoubtedly a minor addition for the devs, considering the scope of the game, it transforms Empire at War, taking it from being just a game to a cinematic experience. Without it, I wouldn't have a lot of this awesome footage to show you guys. So if any of the developers happen to stumble onto this video, I just want to say thank you, and great job. The last thing I think deserves to be talked about is the mods. Now I won't be talking about any one mod at length here, but expect to see a few mod spotlights for Empire at War posted to Codex Review in the future. Despite its age, the game still has an amazingly active modding community that delivers content so expansive and polished, they could be called games in their own right. Let's take a moment to talk about my 3 favorites: Republic at War, Awakening of the Rebellion, and Thrawn's Revenge. Republic at War is a total conversion mod that puts you in the shoes of the Republic or the Confederacy of Independent Systems during the height of the Clone Wars. You can expect to see all of your favorites from that era, from heroes to ships, and it's more polished in many respects than even the vanilla game. Awakening of the Rebellion is another total conversion that just adds and changes so much I wouldn't even know where to start. But out of the 3, its graphics and UI are by far the standouts and are such improvements that you won't even recognize what game you're playing. Last, but definitely not least, Thrawn's Revenge is yet another total conversion set after the events of the Battle of Endor, and includes a lot of characters and stories from the expanded universe. Expect to see factions like the New Republic, the Imperial Remnant, and the Empire of the Hand, as well as many others. I really wish there was time to show you guys some of these and talk about them here, but that would stretch this review long past 30 minutes, and I still wouldn't be able to do them justice. Truth be told, each one of these includes so much content that they could easily get a 20-minute mod spotlight each, and even that might be a bit brief. Let's jump into the conclusion. So the question you might be asking yourself now is, does Empire at War stand up today? And the answer is yes, it does. Even compared to many of the more modern strategy titles, Empire at War still stands out today, and it could be fairly said that it truly achieved something that even today might be difficult to accomplish. With everything being said and done, the graphics may be a bit dated, and the ground combat is frustrating at times, but nearly everything else shines. Despite the flaws I covered, despite the bad, Empire at War just has so much on offer here that you can't pass it up. If you've never seen or heard of this game before today, then do yourself a favor and go get a copy. The game is so old now that even the gold pack is always fairly cheap on Steam or GOG, and gets even cheaper during sales. But even if you pick it up at the regular price, then it's still well worth it. If you're uncertain of whether you want the Steam or the GOG release, then I'll make a recommendation. If you want an easier time modding and are a bit less savvy when it comes to fixing problems, then you're far better off with the Steam release. However, if you're the kind of person who wants DRM-free games and are willing to go the extra mile for modding content, GOG is for you. Any Star Wars fan can expect to get far more than their money's worth on this one. Everyone I've ever known who owned Empire at War had easily put 100+ hours into it, and that's at the very low end of the spectrum. Personally speaking, I stopped keeping track after the 1,000 hour mark, and to date, I own the Steam version, the GOG version, the original box copy version, and the gold pack box copy version. The mods also do so much to extend the lifespan of the game, and with a lot of the great total conversion mods, not only are you looking at a massive bump in terms of replayability, but also huge improvements to graphics, UI, controls, and major additions in terms of content. I will always remember Empire at War as a landmark game that earned its place in history, and who knows, maybe one day a company that is competent and not evil may end up with the Star Wars license, and maybe we'll see a quality remake instead of a cash grab. Maybe not, but it's nice to dream. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, I want to take a moment to thank you for sticking with it. If you enjoyed this review and want to see more content like it, then please hit the subscribe button and like the video. If you have anything to say, agree or disagree, or just a suggestion on what you want to see reviewed next, then go ahead and drop a comment down below. If ever you want to engage with myself or the community on a more personal level, I've also included the link to the official Discord in the description down below. If you love the music in this video and want to hear more like it, then please take a moment and check out 12am Coffee's SoundCloud. You'll find a link both in the annotations right now, as well as in the description down below. Before I sign off here, I want to say thank you to 12am Coffee for his amazing music that he gave me for this video, and also to everyone who was supportive of me starting this channel and who helped me out in the production process. It wouldn't be possible without you guys. That's all I've got for you today, although it was quite a long one. Stay safe out there, and I hope to see you all again soon.